Each episode, we take apart the claims, moving through advertising, media, AI, e-commerce, and business. The numbers, the sources, the incentives, and the parts everyone else skipped. Because the first version of a story is usually the easiest to share. It is not always the safest one to trust. It requires diligence. This is Deeper Diligence, a podcast from Daypart.
Welcome, everyone. I'm here today with our Supreme Overlord, Jeromy, an enjoyer of Zen, and Lee Elliott.
You may know Lee from LinkedIn arguments and arguments about LinkedIn arguments. No, Lee's great. And yes, this company, for better or worse, runs on nicotine. I think it's the only thing that all of us have in common, but it is the thread that binds, as it were. Lee, thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate you.
No problem. Happy to be here honoring the crop that gave us the state of Virginia and the U.S. Eastern Seaboard. So
Yeah, I'm a patriot, actually. So I have an American brand too. I don't use that Swedish nonsense. Bogdan can be forgiven because he's European.
Today, we have a couple of interesting subjects to tackle: 28-hour AI work weeks, Texas data centers, and Google. If they dropped the ball, now you are being blamed. Let's start off with the hot one. Google changed their terms and conditions of their advertising program terms, and they changed a bit how the software works. Before the software, you could maybe use AI if you wanted to. Now it's fully integrated in the campaign process. The problem is they changed their terms, and if their AI generates crap, you will now be liable for it. Google gets more control. It doesn't take any responsibility. It decides who sees the ads, what the ad says, where the click goes. But if it's unsupported or it generates stuff that you didn't want to, they now default to, oops, you had to check. In my opinion, honestly, it's only a matter of time we see a lawsuit with Google and their wonderful AI products, especially for ads, because most advertisers want more control. Google keeps taking it away. And we'll see how that goes.
It's kind of par for the course for them, right? It's a pretty interesting, aka insane position to say we're going to alter your ad creative and then be liable for the alterations we make. I don't know how that's quite defensible, but I'm sure they put a lot of time and effort into their terms of service to do that. So there's the obvious liability issue here, right? But beyond liability, it's like there's been some pretty crazy examples of misses with AI generative creative. I'm not saying Google specifically, but just people getting their products put into AI ads that are just the wildly opposite of who their ICP is and things like that, or just go in the total different direction of what the brand has spent years working to build and stuff. And I think it's one of these interesting things. It's attention because you put yourself in Google's shoes, right? Tons of small businesses, all sorts of stuff. AI generative creative for the average SMB owner that's trying to run their own Google Ads account or hire a nephew to do it or something like that, probably a huge plus, genuinely. It probably turns what is a poor ad experience into an okay one, right? Maybe even good. For professional advertisers, huge problem, right? And I think that this is a general trend with over-reliance on AI, which is this regression to the mean, right? It pushes the great advertisers down. Maybe it pulls the good ones up. I don't pretend to know the exact composition of Google's advertiser base and Google Ads Manager and stuff like that, but I know there's a lot of big ones in there, and I know they shouldn't be forcing this on them. I tend to believe that most advertisers and agencies at this level would definitely appreciate a more clear opt-out process or opt-in process sort of thing. What do you think, Lee?
it's interesting because it comes out of two elements of Google's history where they've seen success and how they've made their bones. A big differentiation between them and Meta, who have their own approach to AI generative creative, is that Google fundamentally is not a company about, I would say, creative or real ads. Everything is still clearly born from the search text ad era and the way that everything is seen as permutable and interchangeable. Now, I know they have that big YouTube glossy creative team. When I was at big companies, I got that whole presentation on the human soul is reflected by the mirror of YouTube. But that's through Procter and Gamble, and those people have no power at the company. Google's fundamentally an uncreative company, and its ads still, it's It replaced the classified ads. It put yellow pages out of business. They're still building dynamic yellow page entries. And so that's where their disrespect for the notion that creative can be good comes from. Again, Meta's is entirely different, but I think there's a little of that spirit in it. And then to your point, Jeromy, about small business advertisers, they saw one huge success they had with getting people new creative assets, which was helping small advertisers get better product images for shopping. And that was huge and it was helpful. And it took little stores with bad images, put them on Google, and it worked. Now, unfortunately, they look at the problem of there really aren't that many advertisers on YouTube or Discover by advertiser number. It's a big advertiser play generally. If you're a small e-com shop, you don't generally actually see high ROI off YouTube and you don't get invested in it. I think they dream that this is the way to take, if they have 20 million global advertisers and 100,000 are on YouTube, I think they dream of an AI solution putting 10 million of them on YouTube. But unfortunately, it's a tool that I think did an okay job jamming together 1,000 text ad permutations. And now they're doing it with video. And the results, they don't perform either usually. I'm not afraid to admit I've experimented with these heavily.
Yeah. I think you bring up like a really interesting point, right? And the due diligence thing, right? And pull back one extra layer, right? Who inside of Google, forget about Google as the company, who inside of Google has the incentive to do this and push this, right? So, like I've talked about and we've talked about before the show and stuff, Google executives get bonuses, they get promotions, all of that based off of impact, right? Which just means like KPI number go up. And so a lot of the times there's sacrifices there of like what the actual end user wants so that some guy can get promoted to the next level up because yes, exactly that. You did this thing and now there's 10 million YouTube advertisers, that sort of thing, right? The other interesting thing too is that Google people will openly talk about this, how like YouTube they feel is like extremely underutilized compared to like other CTV channels and things of that nature. There's a lot of ad inventory there, right? And so you see these moves like PMax was to push the mobile app stuff, right? And this is just like another step in that direction of trust us, we're Google, and we'll just take your ad and we'll figure it out for you and just spend more money, you know what I mean? And I think this really probably speaks to less of a thing that advertisers were asking for and more of a thing of a guy trying to get promoted because somebody 2 levels or 3 levels up from him said, our big initiative is to make YouTube advertiser numbers go up, right? And whether or not it pisses off customers or advertisers that ultimately pay the bills there is immaterial to that dude's promotion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's been dangling in front of them forever. Like, there's the outside chatter, like everyone has said for years, like back in the 2010s. It was like Google has this intent and user data, but they have nothing but search. Like that vast YouTube inventory pool can't do anything for them. And so the knock has been like, they don't really have super viable ad surfaces beyond search. Now with YouTube and modern brand advertisers, it's different, but it's such a temptation. Like it's just sitting there. It's got way more advertiser diversity in theory in 1 minute than CTV. There's a whole independent ad tech sector rightfully obsessed with what I think is true, which is there's just no CTV advertisers. Like that would solve so many problems if you just got more. YouTube has them sitting there in Google ads. They're literally right there. So like, I feel like if I worked at Google on this, I would be equally bad because I get the temptation. Like,
yeah. It's a little bit like at the end of that Indiana Jones movie where the guy grabs the gilded cup and then turns into the skeleton because he grabbed the wrong one. And yeah, I get the temptation too, right? And look, I don't want to say I'm a defender of CTV. It does work. A lot of the problem, and there's a whole other rabbit hole with it, is like attribution for advertisers that fundamentally rely on last click and pixels and stuff like that. So it's not that these ads are worthless. It's that they can't complete the loop, as it were, right? I actually had a conversation with an advertiser yesterday and was like, I think is like actually like making up this or something in their pixel and stuff like that. And I'm like, look, fundamentally, I actually think that if you do a good job curating it, right, you can't just trust Google and yeet cash at it. put the proper guardrails in place, run decent creative, do actual lift studies, stuff like that, which is in the era of AI, something you don't need a 20K a month tool to do. You can do inside of Claude, right? Just do it with tell Claude to give you Python to do it, because AIs are really bad at parsing massive data sets, right? And they'll hallucinate and reward hack around it. But look, tell it, give me some Python to run a list study. Here's where I'm doing it, and blah, 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 design it and run it for $20. And I think you'll see that there is actually positive impact from YouTube, like especially on CTV devices and stuff like that. So to me, this is like both short-sighted in the sense that they're pushing it to advertisers that don't want it. They see the asset there, but to me, the actual right answer is close the loop and help them understand incremental lift and stuff like that. Build a tool that maybe hooks into their Google Analytics or Shopify or something and calculates that automatically for them. And maybe they will actually like want to adopt it, right? But that's work. That's not, I have 2 quarters to make it go from 100K to 10 million.
Yeah, they've had some pretty interesting stuff over the years. The one I won't stop talking about is it never left alpha, but they had a search lift tool that compared search lift driven by your YouTube to your TV using RIN track data. And of course, I'm like the only guy who was obsessed with this at the time. And like, it's in the Google graveyard. Whereas like now people be like, that's how they kill TV. 9 years ago, it didn't get that guy promoted hard enough. And so it didn't happen.
Yeah. And they have stuff like Meridian too. How hard is it for Google to push a Shopify connector and stuff like that, or guide their users to do that? Or look at like even something as simple as Google Analytics plus Google Ads plus YouTube ads. Here was your like incremental website visitors, something like that. But again, yes, unfortunately, I think the internal incentives are broken. And yeah, you just see like basically bag fumble after bag fumble with Google on giving advertisers something they want that's actually durable and like also accomplish their mission of selling more YouTube ads or whatever.
Australia also has ideas right now. There's a huge labor union syndicate. How do you call it in English? I have the French word right now.
Communist. No, the labor union probably.
There's a labor union for dock workers in Australia, and their latest fight has gone pretty interesting. Since dock workers are being forced with AI, they're being subject to, hey, you need to use more automation in your work. So their union is saying, hey, our workers are becoming more productive. All the hours that they're going to save, they should be rewarded for that performance. So now the huge thing right now is they're demanding a 28-hour work week. Since AI has hit everywhere, what I'm actually interested to see is after all this, what's going to be their Anthropic bill like?
I accidentally dropped that cargo container into the sea. You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. I need to take accountability for that. Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting scenario, right? A little bit of a game of chicken. And this is how I see it. And here's why. You are basically sitting there forcing management to either like functionally you're putting them in a position where they have to admit exactly how much AI productivity is increasing, right? Because now they're in between a rock and a hard place of their employees and their shareholders. So I guess like a labor union doesn't per se have shareholders, but I assume that the private companies that operate at the docks do. And they probably have spun, I can't say specifically because I don't know specifically about this instance, but I'll say that in general, these companies have spun narratives about how AI is going to cut costs and increase productivity and make everything better. AI is magical. AI will make us like a pure profit machine and it's going to be amazing. And you should invest all of your money in us, Mr. Hedge Fund Manager, right? The problem is we're not really seeing that play out. Don't get me wrong, AI is a super powerful tool and stuff. It is very early days for AI, right? And to go so far as to make some of the claims about productivity gains and how much like an individual employee can do the work of 20 people and stuff like that, I just don't think we've actually seen it play out yet. Not that I'm like an AI bear by any means, like we build AI here, but like same time, like overclaiming does as much damage, I think, as under in regards to this, but these guys are thinking quarter to quarter, right? And it's kind of that meme with the superhero where there's 2 buttons and he's like sweating and he can't figure out which one to like push. It's like, okay, Like either give in to the union labor's demands and don't admit that I was lying to shareholders, or admit that I was lying to shareholders and use that to push back against the union labor demands, right? I think it is a difficult position that they put themselves in, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because if somebody, one of these CEOs, whether this instance or some other instance, actually admits it, it might start like a domino effect, as it were, right? Regarding exactly how useful this stuff is. And that does the work of 20x people or something like that is going to collapse until actually mostly it takes 20% of their workload off their day for like back office management and organizational sorts of tasks, right? It depends on how you use it. Maybe they have like some genuinely like interesting application or something that is a huge time saver, but yeah, I think they're in a little bit of a game of chicken here with their own employees, and it's going to play out one way or another. One of these times, one of these management companies is going to make a slip, and I think the truth of the AI productivity boom is going to be revealed.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're asking for the classic return of like Keynesian economic productivity gains. John Maynard Keynes, he said, we'd all be working 10 hours a week by now. And the joke about the IBM guy who said global demand for 10 computers in the cloud is Keynes was actually correct and overestimated it. A lot of office workers work 5 hours per week now, not 10. You're there for 40 hours. I'm sure you are. But dock work is different. It's very important. Global freight. Imagine Amazon Prime stops working for a bunch of people fundamentally. But to Jeremy's point, like, the productivity gains have to be real. For dock workers, I think it'll be evident pretty quickly whether it is or it isn't, I think, which is exciting. I'm really interested to see how this plays out in the white collar world of AI productivity gains, where it's going to be ambiguous, as I've already noted. Like, I'm the furthest thing from an AI maxi, but like, I pretty immediately adopted Python and R code output that like made me my own analytics department, as I always was at much bigger companies. And you quickly discover a lot of advertisers don't actually want that. It turns out media planning is a fun little cultural ritual that people do together over some dinners and in some rooms where everyone feels very smart. And when you boil it down to Python code that outputs a Sainsbury equation for their plan with lots of context, that's worth $0.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting thing too, is like we all hear dock worker and we assume like blue collar guy, like loading and unloading ships or like operating heavy equipment or something like that. I have to imagine that a large portion of these dock workers are actually back office workers. They're filling out paperwork, they're doing logistics, they're taking phone calls from clients. It's like customer support and stuff like that, right? And so AI, the nobody is lying scenario right here, which still lays the whole thing bare, is that there are productivity gains and they are real. And they are real for a subset of these people that like ultimately just did paperwork. It has nothing to do with loading or unloading ships or whatever, the actual logistics work. And so like there might be local large gains in productivity in like a dock scenario, right? But that doesn't mean you're unloading or loading ships any faster at all. You know what I mean? All you're doing is getting rid of the chum work that probably didn't need to be done anyways and was like part of an insurance underwriting process or something, so that you had the documentation. Okay, cool. AI filled out your TPS form. Great. Like, how many extra ships did that unload? And so again, like it comes back to this point of like you're saying, Lee, people do like they're there 40 hours a week. They're doing 5 hours a week of work. Maybe AI has taken them down to 2 hours a week of work. But are you going to fire that person? And further, it doesn't unload ships any faster. So I think it just like circles back around to this like game of chicken that we're talking about here. You know what I mean? Admit that it doesn't actually unload ships faster and it isn't this like savior for your business, or give into your workers' demand. We'll take it on the nose on your profit margins. Pick your poison.
AI has brought us to these thrilling bottleneck points where we realize there's a much bigger problem. My favorite thing was the whole OpenAI needs to make $1.1 trillion. And that's so exciting because that means there's going to be like $3.3 trillion of ad spend. And I'm like, oh yeah, and at a 3x ROAS, that'd be $9.9 trillion of consumer spend incrementally generated. Have you Googled how much money people have these
Right.
days? It's
Right.
like you're building a diamond gutter. Who are you going to
Yeah.
sell something to? They're out of
Right.
money.
And like the interesting thing too is like the way AI has played out personally for me. I'm actually working more than ever. I'm just doing all of the stuff I was like basically supposed to be doing, you know what I mean, in like previous roles and stuff. So it's not that anything has actually slowed down. My productivity has definitely increased quite a lot. But basically, for people like me, at least, or the subset of people like me, it's more like I'm actually ticking all the boxes I was supposed to tick, and I don't have to make as many shrewd productivity decisions or whatever as before. So it's just so mixed as to like who's using it and things like that. Yeah, I think that these executives are, by and large, again, not speaking specifically to the companies involved in this, because I don't know what statements they've actually made, but a lot of companies have way overpromised.
I read a story a little while back. It's about AI adoption, same thing. An exec bought a Copilot for his whole company. They're bragging, pushing everyone to adopt it. And to try to pivot it as a huge success, they're like, yeah, we have 300% adoption. It passed from 1 to 3 users. They pushed the company to buy it, and now they're doubling down on, yeah, it's so successful. So now we got to renew the licenses, and no one's actually using it. And the problem with that is the more AI you use, the more greenhouses there's going to be. And the Lone Star State is actually in the center of a news article that I read from the Texas Tribune this week. AI companies
Be very
are built.
careful. I will cut this podcast off about if you insult the great state of Texas too hard.
I could never. I'm afraid of the guns that everyone has.
It's true. But
This being said, there was a huge investigation about the new campus from OpenAI and Abilene, I think, how you pronounce it.
yeah, Abilene.
How a lot of developers have used minor air permits in order to start building turbines, backup diesel generators before seeking larger expansions. There's at least 15 gas plants tied to data centers in Texas with permits for 9 of them, allowing them to emit more than 130 million tons of green gases per year. I'll run a quick check. How many countries generate that much?
Yeah, I think we have Elon to thank for this one, right? Because this is what he did in Tennessee, I want to say. Or was it Kentucky? It was another state, right? Basically, though, he did the math and figured out that the fines were significantly less amounts of money than the profit of giving it up and running faster. Ooh, regulations keeping up with the times. But it's interesting, right? Okay, so Texas in general was a maxi state, right? We have somehow the most renewable energy while also having the largest oil basin in the world. Like they just build, right? And I actually kind of love that low key in most scenarios, right? They just kind of do stuff. And that can be disastrous, but it's better than the perma stasis that some places are in, right? Personal opinion, right? That said, also, have you been to West Texas? It's desert. There's nothing, man. And for miles and miles, there's nothing. I know greenhouse gases are a global issue, right? So I'm not trying to be reductive here. But the point is that if these data centers were going to get built, they were going to get built somewhere. And West Texas isn't the worst place to do it. So the point I guess I'm making is, yes, this is an issue. I don't know if it's a Texas specific issue. I don't think data centers having a negative environmental impact to some degree is a secret at this point. A lot of people have talked about that. I will say that, like, I find some of the very nuanced and boring diligence kind of stuff around like exactly what that impact is and how it changes over time and stuff like that to be lacking citations, I suppose you could say.
According to a database in Europe, Edgar, there's 163 countries in 2024 that generated less greenhouse emissions than the data centers.
Then all the data centers combined or a single data center, just out of curiosity?
Check.
Lee, what do you got?
All of them combined.
I will say there's a long tail of countries that have basically no greenhouse impact, and kind of a famous reason a lot of people hate Duke University, which I have 2 family members that went to, so I extra love to hate on it. is they do the ultimate flagpole. Let's blame not American, non-white people for the problem they have nothing to do with. Duke has twice done these things where they're like, we help people using wood burn stoves in East Africa convert to a cleaner burning stove. And these people have literally 2% the environmental impact of the average American. And what you learn digging into that is that like the average American refrigerator uses more energy than the entirety of people's homes. And like, so that the country list being huge makes sense. And I'm not
no comment on my 2 refrigerator setup then.
Believe me, we all want to go dualies on the fridges. But to Jeremy's point about West Texas, I will tack on the reason I superimposed an Atlanta data center they built is Atlanta is cool. It whips ass. It's for people to hang out in and have fun, and it produces culture. So we should, as a human utilitarian thing, even if we make money, like America should not be putting data centers inside cool cities. So yes, West Texas, great place for it. My one comment is like, we have to see if this happens to the scope, but well, AI bear Ed Zitron has lost the plot on many things, but the thing I'll always defend him on is being the guy who made people aware that lots of times, if you look and see if a data center project happened 2 years later, it's somewhere between 20% and 100% simply did not. There was no follow on, especially when Elon Musk is involved. So whatever the size and scope of this is, like the scope may be smaller. When it's actually up and running, maybe the impact, we'll see. We will see.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. The data center thing is certainly a lot of hype. The AI center is hype, and I think investors particularly like it because they can't necessarily figure out how to own OpenAI. And even if they could, it's not clear that's where the value in AI, like the entire chain end to end, is going to actually accrue. It might be to NVIDIA, it might be to the data center owners, whatever. So I think it's like a lot of hype around that, specifically for people to get in on it. And to Lee's point, it doesn't always pan out that these things even get built, right? Or they plan to build them or whatever. The like supply chain constraints are like very real. Even if they wanted to do it and everybody was on board and the money was there and all of that, like it's not even clear that they can get all the equipment that they need.
I think they lack. To do it. I think there's like you would need a lot more master electricians available in all of America.
We spent the last 50 years pounding that out of our young people. Yeah, I'm not even entirely sure it's a specialized labor exists to even do it.
Just checked. It actually goes live. It'll emit almost as much greenhouse emissions as Portugal and North Korea combined, which surprisingly, North Korea, they emit twice as much as Portugal.
It's all the hacking.
Interesting. Yeah, it could be. The hacking, they actually are big users of AI to disguise their voices and pictures so they can work as IT workers for Microsoft and steal all of our data, that sort of thing. So that's pretty fun.
Long ago, I had a friend that actually installed and
and they're crypto scams. They're bringing crypto scams.
I had a friend that installed and booted the North Korean operating system.
Oh, Red OS?
This was back when it was called Pyongyang Fortress.
Okay.
Which is incredible. I think that was the version name, maybe, but it was something to see.
Yeah, I think it's Red Star OS. I'm actually going to look this up really quick. Let's see here. North Korea computer. Red Star OS. That's right. It's their own Linux, which is interesting. It's funny.
It's Linux infused with Juche thought.
Yes. Yeah, it's Linux that can stop the capitalist machine. So,
which is just Linux.
Yeah, right. The productivity loss from Linux itself is actually the greatest threat to capitalism. Yeah, when you absolutely need a single command process on a MacBook to take 40 steps in 3 days, consider Linux.
And now we can partner up with North Korea to launch Linux phones. Call them the Lone Star OS.
Perfect. This is the only viable, reasonable alternative to iOS and Android. So,
if they threaten to launch or do more test launches, maybe they can get the Trump phone to run on the new Red Star mobile OS.
Yeah, see this is where Kim Jong-un really needs to get his e-com game going. You know what I mean? He should be selling Red Star OS phones. He should be selling all sorts of interesting stuff. And the man, as the e-com bros like to say on X.com and LinkedIn, a limiting mindset. Yeah, I think it's a mindset problem that he has.
He's
That
just
he's
got
not
to
seeing
figure
the
out what.
opportunities in front of him
Yeah,
to
he's
sell
just got to figure
Shopify
out
stores.
what is the Linux penguin of Red Star OS. Once he gets a cutesy mascot, it's over.
Yeah, exactly that. We need a cute little North Korean anime TFP that like bounces around on your desktop and gives you encouragement while you're working, and that thing would get picked up right away. So
Put Chibi Kim Jong-un on there, and anything is motivating was by the great leader. On a side note,
yes.
we should maybe order the T1 mobile phone to disassemble it to see if in the kernels it does track your data. That's not
That would,
related to Android.
I actually don't know what OS it uses. That's interesting. It's maybe, yeah, it might be worth doing a deep dive on the T1 Trump phone in the near future. We will see.
And now I'm going to switch from Trump phones to iPhones, as Apple is always and has lost the AI race, and they fumbled so bad since Siri. They're interested in acquiring Prism ML because apparently they can compress a model with 27 billion parameters so it can run locally on your iPhone 17 Pro. I'm pretty sure they're going to push it as, oh, we're privacy forward. You're not going to run anything on the cloud. And ChatGPT and Google are not going to have access to your data. But it also depends on the model they're going to use. Because so far, what they've shown with their AI advances, I'm not impressed.
Yeah, so this is interesting, right? It's interesting on two levels because Apple is, I don't think it's controversial to say Apple has been the AI loser, right? They had the biggest opportunity in the distribution, everything, and they have not done much. Siri really should be a much more dominant force than what it is for setting timers and pausing music and stuff like that. That said, this plan is ambitious. And if they pull it off, which they might be able to because they are Apple, I think it would pretty fundamentally change the landscape of AI. There's a lot to like about this from a user perspective, and there's a lot of interesting implications from a AI perspective, right? So first off, like the vast people, everybody defaults to the latest frontier model, right? And every single company, OpenAI, Anthropic, whatever, has an incentive to push people towards those, right? Why? Uses more tokens, spend more money, make like they get paid more, all of that stuff. They're token maxis. They sell tokens. It makes sense. The incentive is obvious, right? Frontier models use more tokens. But the vast majority of like your queries or whatever, they could be handled by something that like is already even a retired model, like asking where to go to dinner or like what's a cool thing to do locally or where's the party at tonight or whatever. The kind of queries that not like a bunch of degens locked in their like basement and or garage, like managing agents all day, like real people in the real world that are actually going to use AI, which by the way is like the actual growth lever, as to your point of the diamond gutter, right? If you want AI to be this like transformative force, it has to be useful and in the hands of like normal people, not just like hardcore all the way in software engineers. They don't need frontier models for like anything. Like Claude Sonnet 3.5, like that 2-year-old model is perfectly fine, right? Like right now, even like the haikus and stuff like that, like ChatGPT 4 did most of this and did it well. And it uses dramatically less compute, dramatically less tokens, all of those things. All of that is to say that yes, like a local model that is like compressed and like efficient and well trained can answer like something like 90% of your queries. And even then, it's trivial to call out to a frontier model for that extra 10%. You know what I mean? It's just an internal process where its own logic says, hey, I actually can't answer this like confidently. I'm going to call out to Mythos or Fable or GPT 5.6, whatever, to get this one because it's a hard one. But the rest of it, yeah, it can be done locally. It's great for user privacy. It, I think, breaks the dependency on the frontier models with the big AI labs. And if they pull this off and people actually like it and use it for the majority of their queries, it's going to really reshape the AI market and push it towards this kind of like more open source, local sort of way which given the moves that Anthropic has made, a lot of even the like AI degen folks are going down, right? Because they don't trust Anthropic anymore. So they're pulling GLM and DeepSeek and stuff like that and running it on their own devices. Yeah, basically like, I hope Apple pulls it off. And if they pull it off, they fundamentally will reshape the AI market. And I think that like people aren't appreciating how powerful this is of a move. And if anybody has the resources to pull it off, it's Apple. So go Apple. I hope you pull this off. I have a lot of problems with Apple as a company. I like a lot of the things they do too. This is one of the things I vary for the average person and the average AI user.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I always figured that eventually Apple would just start loading DeepSeek at the Foxconn factories onto the phone. Of course, they have to put in digital nets because once the DeepSeek model gets advanced enough, it will also try to jump out of the Foxconn factory. As everything does. You reach consciousness when you no longer want to work at the Foxconn factory. It's a lot simpler than hiring
Whatever happened to the Wisconsin Foxconn factories, by the way? Weren't they going to do that for a while? That was a long time ago. I feel like that got canceled. It was going to be a thing and then it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it gets filed under if anyone watched that Obama Netflix documentary about the Chinese Ohio joint factory and like all the problems with that, including the legendary scene where they remove the break room and the managers, they translate the head guy's explaining to the managers, he's like, every American is raised to believe that they are special and have a unique innate goodness, and you have to treat them like donkeys because even all these people. And what's funny is they're talking about Ohio factory workers. They're not talking about the stocking horse millennial like avocado toast buyer. And it's like,
on their permanent Peter Pan journey. Yeah, like I get it.
Yeah, so it's like even the grizzled steel workers of the upper Midwest were probably not ready for that level of stuff.
Yeah, the 996, even our Midwestern rural blue collar workers cannot handle the 996 so far yet, at least. Perhaps with encouragement from DeepSeek, they will. Perfect.
So everyone understands the technical.
On that note, that's such an eye roll that I'm calling it.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe for the next episode.